welcome. I'm Adam Dennison, Vice President, Midsize Enterprise Services with the Channel Company. And please welcome today, Mehdi Avtahi, CTO of Technology Evaluation Centers. Mehdi, welcome.
Hello, how are you there?
Real good, real good. TEC, as you know, is a great partner of ours at MES at both of our live events, as well as at our MES IT Leadership Network. Mehdi is here today to join us for a webinar. The title of the webinar, Strategies for Getting the Best Deal for Your Enterprise Software. So something that's certainly top of mind for a lot of IT leaders within the mid-market. Before I turn it over to Mehdi to discuss the webinar topic here, I just want to real quick kind of paint the picture in terms of what we're seeing at MES, along with Gartner, which is one of our research partners. We do our biannual state of the mid-market research, and we just came out of the field with that over the summer. Just a couple kind of big trends that we're seeing right now. One, as far as top business challenges in the next 12 to 24 months, I think it's no surprise here. The economy, recession, inflation, those are three major things that business owners, business leaders, as well as IT leaders are thinking about on a regular basis. When we look at the top IT challenges, security is still by far and away the number one area that they've got some challenges and concerns. And then that's followed closely again by budget, cost control, as well as transforming from legacy apps. Those are both in the top 5. And then finally, when we look at where's the biggest increase in spend going to be from an IT perspective, again, security is at the top of the mountain on that one. But the other couple of areas here that TEC really plays into, CRM, BI, ERP. So these are all within the top 7 as far as increased spend. And again, kind of key areas that are on the tops of the minds of the mid-market. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mehdi here to kind of walk us through TEC and what they're seeing in the market and how, more importantly, how they can best help you out with your enterprise software strategies. Mehdi, take it away.
Thank you very much. And, I've tried to do my best to give some, what we see in the market and what's going on, and the best advice actually on how to do the digital transformation for mid-market companies. And these are not really surprising findings, but I think everybody can enjoy and take something home with it. Basically, as you just said also, that some of the most critical projects in a life cycle of a company is the ERP or the enterprise applications they invest on. And some of the most challenging projects that a company can actually tackle, which also can cost them a lot of money. As you just mentioned, Gartner has also indicated that the ERP failure rates can exceed 75% globally, which means that only 25% of ERP projects somehow succeed in terms of their goals. And McKinsey also estimates that 70% of the digital transformation projects within organizations also fail. Now, what is the definition of failure? The definition of a failure to us, it means that the projects go over time and over budget. And it doesn't really necessarily mean that the projects don't go live at all. So it may actually, with any, with all kinds of troubles that the companies go through, they may actually turn the switch on, but they may fail to realize the objectives that these projects have in terms of materializing the return that was expected. Overall, the failures could happen, as I said, before or after go live, and in some cases may not be recognized several years after actually the going live with the applications. And 30% of the implementation actually take 3 to 4 times the cost that they were budgeted for. So that's a huge number. And if you think about getting the value and the best deal out of any ERP project or digital transformation project, I think the best way is to make sure that your projects don't fail and get into the return that your company was expecting going into these projects. Now, during the past 20, 30 years, there were so many horror stories about ERP failures. Probably one of the major ones that was very well documented is the Nike failure, which costed over $400 million and lost revenue of $100 million. Several lawsuits were launched against different parties. And at the end of the day, if you look into the literature that was written about this failure, it was very obvious that there was an unproven technology for Nike, and they were not really taking into consideration the unique nature of the business that Nike was running at the time and the growth projections that they had. So the application was very slow to response, and there was not enough integration with other systems that Nike was running at the time, and there were many bugs and issues. So the lessons learned from that would be you have to always set realistic goals, and you should not, jump into unproven technologies or methodology for your business, and take time to test, integrate, and train your users. So this is all easier said than done, but since then, all kinds of ERP implementations are done at this scale with success. So you shouldn't be scared of these failures and not jumping into these kind of projects, but you have to also know what needs to be done. Another example of a failure is the Avon, which with an estimated sunk cost of $125 million. For this project in particular, the main issue and the challenge was the change management. Although the functionality did not match exactly with the business requirements, it was something that you could actually get over with proper training and proper change management. So at one point, the salespeople with Avon stopped selling products for the company, and they refused using the system. And this is all because of the inadequate training of the users. And what we get out of this project failure is that investing in change management is critical to the project success, and also a proper software selection that matches the functionality to the needs and requirements of the business is also very, very important, and also proper training and testing of the personnel. Now, I'm going through these cases just because my next slides are going to show you how you can avoid these kinds of problems going on. And these are just some of the examples that, for example, the Air Force, U.S. Air Force, they had over $1 billion of project sunk cost and with delay of 7 years in implementing their ERP. And this was all due to massive scope creep that they had coming up with the project, and they couldn't cope with the amount of work, which was underestimated at the beginning of the project. Waste management is another example with the sunk cost of $100 million. Again, the major cause for that, again, was the misunderstanding the size and the scope of the project, misunderstanding or miscalculation of the budgets and the timelines, and the scope creep, again, is a massive cause for the failure in here. Same thing can be said about Hewlett-Packard HP, which is with a sunk cost of $160 million. So overall, the common theme that you find in most of these failures is a lack of proper change management, a lack of alignment of the project or the application functionality with the business needs, scope creep, which is part of the project management part, and basically training and testing and integration. So these are the main causes of most of the project's failures. Now, I've gone through many cases, and I could categorize some of the causes of failure to different stages of the project, the digital transformation projects. So if I define initiation of a project, like before you even think about an ERP application or a CRM application, there are things that you can do to ensure you have a successful implementation at the end. So some of the things that you have to do is the software fit. So how you actually select the software in terms of the functionality. And some of the causes could be, again, poor software fit or inaccurate business requirements. Another major cause could be the top management, the executive management's lack of understanding of what the application is trying to achieve and accomplish. And also the lack of understanding of system requirements. So now, if you think about all of these things, that tells you that before you start the project, you need to actually understand the full scope of your project, the scope of the delivery, and choosing the right implementation partner is a key aspect of the work that needs to be done prior to engaging any of the vendors or even internally within the organization. And in many cases, companies have this notion that our company is one of a kind, and because of that, we need to do a lot of customization. Because of that, we need to actually reinvent all the processes to fit our process, which is not necessarily true. Yes, we are talking about a lot about business fit and to the software, but we can always find off-the-shelf applications and best practices that given by the vendors that can fit your business processes. The next step of the project is the planning. Planning is and the causes that can be attributed to the planning phase could be insufficient funding and insufficient resources, lack of accountability, and to make timely and high quality decisions. So which means that you don't understand in many cases as the initialization part of the project was, you don't understand the requirements properly and the process or the functionality that the software is supposed to provide to you. And also in the planning part, you also have to look at investing in change management and proper project planning and governance. So you have to invest money and you need to allocate resources, being human resources and monetary resources to the change management and governance of the project. And have to have proper implementation strategy and also make sure that your implementation timelines are realistic. And in many cases, we see that companies, for no valid reason, set unrealistic timelines for themselves to rush through implementation of the applications, which also causes the capacity planning problems and running into troubles. Now, once you pass that and you get into the execution of the project, there are some aspects of causes that can be attributed to the failure of the project, which is the lack of commitment from business leadership during the implementation. Which means that they did not understand, again, as if we go back to the initialization and the planning part, their understanding of what the application is supposed to do and give them may not be there. And again, another thing that we already talked about was to making the new ERP application look like the legacy, which is forcing customization into the project, which allows the project to go over the budget and over time, which compound by lack of adequate resources and during the execution part, and the experience of the consultants working on that could be also attributed to the execution time failure reasons. Now, the other major category is the monitoring and control of the project, which is the causes could be insufficient training and supporting, inadequate testing, and insufficient data cleansing and not enough validation, which means that your data, when it comes to the new system, is not properly migrated into the new system, and you're going to have a lot of issues with the system, and people are going to lose confidence on the information that is being done. Now, closure of the project, which is the last step, is often something that goes on and on. So you're not going to be able to see the closure on this project because of ongoing customization and because of the change management issues that comes in. People are not going to adopt the new system, and you have to retrain them and retrain them, and you have to go through this cycle many times in order to get the project off the ground and successful. Now, how do people get into this problem? In general, the pattern that we see in terms of how companies are actually buying software and enterprise application is that they look at technology as the first challenge to tackle. So basically, they come up with a certain number of vendors. They look at these vendors, and they're right away they face these challenges that how many of these things that they're showing to them are marketing rhetoric and which ones are fact? What are they promising them, whether and where they promise and versus what they actually deliver? In the back of their mind, there are software and hardware compatibility issues. And there are some technology decisions that needs to be made also, which people try to tackle right away at the beginning, which is the security cloud and also how do you implement the business processes. So this is where we see a lot of people that are in the market to buy and replace their legacy systems. They start with technology. They look at different applications in the market. They go through the demos. They go look at this literature, and they may even get a contact with the salespeople at the in these companies, and they start the negotiation right away. Now, based on this brief interaction, they usually start building their shortlist, and they right away fall into the second sets of challenges, which is we could categorize them as internal challenges, which is they don't have the right resources to actually evaluate and select the proper applications. They don't have enough resources internally to build consensus among the different stakeholders. And also, there are communication gaps between different groups within the organization teams and different departments. And if by any luck, they manage to overcome this internal challenges and they actually sign up with a vendor to go into the implementation phase, that's where they start looking at the project challenges, which is they have to look at their requirements. And often we see that because the way that they started the project, they don't have proper or complete requirements. The scope of the project is not clear, so that leads into scope creep. And they have difficulty measuring the success, and there is insufficient planning into the execution of the project. And again, the changing requirements during the project execution leads into going back to the technology part and trying to add or remove technology pieces and getting everybody on board. So that becomes the circle that keeps going and going and going. That way it's going to create this project that it looks like it's never ending. Now, how do you overcome that? So the best way to overcome this process and to overcome this notion is to properly gather your requirements. So what we are recommending that the vendor, the users do before even talking to any vendors is to just start a project planning phase, which is by properly gathering the requirements and clearly identifying the scope of the application, defining the success factors, and freeze the scope of the application. So at that point, you know exactly what's in and what's out of your application. And then plan your internal resources and fill all the gaps within your internal organization. And by taking advantage of experienced consultants, build consensus on the scope and the requirements within the different stakeholders within your organization. So basically, we are trying to build consensus before getting into talking to the vendors and looking at products and solutions. Once you know the scope, once you know the requirements, at that point, you can actually collect technical information from vendors and from independent sources, which is going to be unbiased, and understand what is being offered and, more importantly, not offered, which is by any solution. What are the gaps in that solution if you choose to go with that solution? And make sure that the decision, all the stakeholders are part of the decision-making process, and at the same time, limit the demands or limit the customization and try to go with out-of-the-box solution as much as possible, which means that you need to select the best application that fits your key business processes. And in order to do that, you need to first, going back to the first line here, you have to understand your business requirements. You have to know the scope. And if you do it in this order, you will be able to get into a proper selection of software and implementation. Now, we actually at Tech, we offer a 4-phase evaluation and selection methodology, which starts with planning and then technical assessment and then qualitative assessment and then finally the negotiation phase, which means that if you follow the previous slides, we are going into a planning phase, which is mapping out all of your current systems and processes and overlapping the current system architecture with your processes. So basically what we are saying is that you have to understand the business processes and the current systems that you have and which system is responsible for which process and where the data is residing for those processes. Once you know that, then you can actually define your target architecture for your enterprise, which means that you can rearrange your processes. If there are duplication in the processes versus applications, you can get rid of them. If there are any Excel or manual forms or processes, you have to identify them and try to basically bring them into a system, which allows you to build an enterprise master plan. This master plan is actually giving you the project scope, which allows you to say, okay, here where we are, here's where we're going to be, and here is the scope of the different applications that we're going to be implementing during this process. Once you know the scope, there you can actually get into a technical assessment of the applications in the market by defining the current processes and the requirements that you have, and defining each one of these processes with their priorities in terms of how important each process is in the overall application evaluation. And also create a functional and technical requirements list. Again, right now, we're still not even talking to the vendors up to that point. So you're trying to see what functionality you need in terms of your requirements. And then at that point, you can actually look at the various vendors against this functional requirement set. And once you do that comparison, you can actually shortlist the potential vendors. So you start with your requirements and process requirements and needs. You convert that into functional requirement set, and then you compare vendors against this functional requirement set, and the top 3, top 4 vendors could actually become your shortlist, where you actually get into a qualitative assessment of the vendors. Now, at that stage, you're still going to be in the driver's seat in terms of the assessment of the project by providing scripted scenario demonstrations based on your critical processes, and also doing a lot of checks and background checks on the vendors, the companies, the implementers, their methodology, their product roadmap, and references and other cost considerations. Based on all of these qualitative assessment, you can come up with a complete due diligence on the solution providers, which to us is just the vendor and the implementation partner or the system integrators. And only at that point, you can actually get into the negotiation phase, which is selecting the finalists based on the overall assessments of their score and define a strategy for the negotiations, whether you're going to be talking about a shorter timeline for the implementation or lower cost or different types of modules or a phased approach. All of these are going to be negotiated, and you also need to negotiate the terms and conditions of the contract, of which after that you can actually negotiate the cost based on the total cost of operations and ownership going forward. So that gives you the signed contract where you can actually now jump into the implementation. So if I want to explain a little bit back into each one of these steps, the first step when I was talking about enterprise architecture, this is what you need to identify during that phase. So you need to know what you're getting in terms of the processes, what are the systems or processes that are going to be included in the new system, and also things that have to be defined into your roadmap as an output of the phase one would be the functional scope of the new application. What are the process gaps? And if there are any gaps between the current system and the future system, how those gaps are going to be fulfilled? What are the legacy systems that are going to be replaced and or integrated into the new system? And if there are any systems that are going to be integrated, how is that integration is going to be played out? And how much is going to cost for the implementation, integration, and everything else? So these are the questions that you need to have the answers before going any further into your project evaluation. The estimated cost and timeline, and whether you're going to do this in a phased approach or a big bang kind of implementation. And some companies and some CEOs or executives are often asking about the return on investment, which is a good exercise for you to understand what is the eventual return going to look like when you are implementing the application. Now, once you go through this, then it should be easy to basically get into your technical evaluation, which is by a technical evaluation, we often divide that technical evaluation into three different silos. Now, for an ERP, for example, you can look at it from a back office functionality to core functionality to niche or complementary functionality for ERP. The back office functionality could be finance, human resources, sales, customer care, technology, workflow management, and so on. And the reason I'm talking about this is that you have to have a systematic approach into this. So that's where you're building consensus within your organization. So the finance people will know where they actually sit in terms of the overall decision. the core functionality of the ERP, depending on your industry, could be manufacturing, inventory, purchasing, supplier management, quality management, warehouse management, shop floor control, or things like that. Again, this is really depending on the industry that you're operating in. And there are some niche and complementary functionality, which is, again, really defined by your industry or sub-industry category that you're in: maintenance management, health and safety, design and engineering, and so on. So the way we often prioritize these categories is that 20% goes to the back office functionality, 50% goes into core functionality, and 30% goes into niche and complementary functionality. And if you think about it, by distributing these kinds of scenarios in terms of the weight and the priority, you're giving everybody a say into the overall decision, but not at the same level. This allows you to build a consensus. And of course, you can argue about different priorities, but this is the general recommendation in terms of the functionality. When it comes to qualitative assessment, as I mentioned before, you have the descriptive scenarios, which allows you to identify and assess, make the assessment on the process fit, ease of use, the overall functionality assessment, technology offerings that the vendors are actually offering you, and any process improvement that they bring to you, and the best practice knowledge of the consultants. These are all going to be items that are going to be discovered during the demonstration sessions. So you can actually look at some of the areas within your business processes and create the script and allow the vendors to go through that process for you. And then you have the supplier and implementation assessment, which is their corporate profile, financial profile, product strategy, implementation services, and so on. These are all the stuff that you actually need to get in terms of the company's profile and whether they are suitable partner for you going forward. And it's not just technical stuff, is their financial health and the company's health that is in question here. And then you have the project assessment. So in terms of the project plan, the project team and their knowledge, any ROI calculations and examples of the ROI realization from the past implementation of the company, you can assess, and any cost estimates and the technical review of what they're offering you should be part of your qualitative assessment of the offers that are on the table. Once you pass all of this, again, you've gone through a redesign and your assessments of your processes. You did the technical evaluation, shortlisted the vendors, and shortlist vendors are being evaluated by the qualitative assessments. And now you get into the finalist list, which is going to the negotiations. And that negotiation allows you to do the contract, negotiation in terms of understanding each and every term in the contract, making sure that you agree with all the terms in the contract is a critical step. So don't sign anything that you don't understand, thinking that, oh, that's never going to happen. I mean, I know that this is like a very basic advice, but it's always happens that clients sign the contract thinking that this is standard contract, and at the end it's going to bite them during the implementation process. As much as possible, ask for professional advice in the technical aspects of your contract, but you can always and you should always get your purchasing people involved in terms of general terms and conditions of the contract being offered. So that we usually look at the contracts in two different ways, the technical terms and the general terms. The general terms should be something that your purchasing people, your internal structure has to be okay with. And the technical piece, you need to get professional advice and knowledgeable people involved in terms of negotiating the terms, the technical terms of your application or the contract, sorry. Once you are finished with the terms and conditions and the contract, then you get into the price negotiation. And this is absolutely the last step of the process, which is once you know all the requirements, all the project scope, and you have everything in detail and everything is uh, very well known to you, that's where you can actually start negotiating the cost with the vendors. And we often see that right away when you start the project, the vendors call in and they offer you a deal that is going to expire in a week. And that is the basic way that you can actually derail your project and looking to a failure of the project. Because often that means that that offer, whether it's being honored or not, is not really reflecting your requirements and your scope of your project. So I would guarantee that at a certain point in the execution of the project, the vendors are going to have a change order done and say, okay, we didn't know about this part, we didn't know about that part, so this is a change order, and you have no way to uh, to fight that cost. So once you know all of this, this is the best time or the last step in order to get the cost of the project down. And as much as possible, because you know the scope of the project and you have all of the reasons to believe that the scope is fully defined and your requirements are done, you can avoid open-ended statement of work kind of time and material basis for contract and negotiate a fixed price deal. Of course, if the scope changes, the price will change, but knowing that you've done your homework properly and you have the scope properly done, you know exactly what you're getting and what you're paying for. And consider the end of the year and the end of quarter discounts, but think also that these kinds of discounts are always available and no vendor is going to say no if you have a good project for them. Now, some of the recommendations is that, again, do not focus on the cost during the technical assessment phase. That's one of the major things that can derail your evaluation. In terms of the BPM or business process management or business process modeling, you have to do it at a high level. Don't do it in detail for the entire organization. Only in certain areas, you may need to do it in more details. Build consensus on the new architecture and do the BPR or business process reengineering with the vendor that you've selected and insist on best practice implementation and avoid any customization. And as much as possible, I would say, any customizations. But in many cases, some customizations might not be totally avoidable, but you shouldn't have the mentality going in that no matter what the application is, I'm going to customize the hell out of it. And also once you know all the solutions and the capabilities, you can then ask for a commercial proposal. So only ask for the proposal and the commercial proposal when you're satisfied with the solution and the capabilities of the vendors, which is clearly define the scope before going anywhere within your organization, within your evaluation. Now, once you do all of this correctly, the good things can happen, actually. So what you see on the screen is some of the data that we have collected from various sources that summarizes the benefits or the savings that a successful implementation of an enterprise application can bring to you. So these are based on past implementations of many, many different applications. So you can see that, for example, one-time inventory holding reduction can range between 2 to 16% with an average of 9%. So if you're holding a huge inventory and you have no way to control it because you have to have the stock in hand to do your production, and that's the only way you know it. You know that by implementing a proper process, you can actually, on average, bring that down by 9%, which in many cases it could be a huge saving. Can by itself can pay for the entire project for mid-market. An ongoing reduction on the inventory holding cost could be up to average of 13.5% and as high as 20%. So some of these, depending on your industries and the level of the level of efficiency that you're in, could actually vary between the lows and the highs. But even if you're conservative and look at the low numbers in here, in many cases, the cost of the project is very well justified by the savings that each of these applications can bring to you. But the key is to, as I said, to identify the processes and the scope of the project right up front and make sure that your project doesn't become one of the failures that I was showing you at the beginning of this presentation. So I am done with this presentation, and if you guys have any questions at any time, you can always contact us. My address is here, and my LinkedIn address was at the beginning of the page, and or you can always contact MES, and they will basically let us know.
Absolutely. Mehdi, thank you so much. I do have a couple of questions that I wanted to ask. From your experience and your perspective, thinking of a typical mid-market sized organization, kind of a twofold question. One is to put a process like this in place, very thorough process. How much time should they plan on that? And then the other side of that is what percentage would you say of mid-market organizations currently do something as thorough as this up front, so they don't have the issues on the back end, and they might be trying to, get to speed to implementation, get through things quicker, and they're going to end up with problems on the back end that might even be much longer than they were on the front end and more expensive. So do you just kind of talk about that a little bit, like that time frame, and then what percent of the mid-market orgs are in need of this?
Yeah, sure. So the timeline for our process, because we basically have a lot of automation involved in terms of the data that we have and the process that we go through, it can range between 3 to 6 months. We have projects that within the mid-market and even in the upper markets, we can successfully go through the entire process from enterprise architecture, definition of the requirements, into vendor evaluation, both technical and qualitative assessment. we can get to the negotiations within 4 to 5 months. And it's very realistic for us to do that. In terms of what is the percentage of the users that are actually doing this, I say that more and more with many companies that have gone through the wrong way by selecting the wrong applications, they realize that there should be a different way of approaching this.
Sure.
We see a lot of companies that come to us that have failures in their previous applications, the selection, and they say, okay, we've done that the wrong way by going to the vendors directly and try to give the keys to the vendors too early, basically, and then it came back and it's not a good solution at the end for us. Now we're rethinking of re-implementation of the process, but during that process, we would like to see a systematic approach in terms of the process. Percentage-wise, I don't know how many percent,
Sure.
what's the actual percentages, but I can say that the people that have burned their bridges with the vendors are coming back and doing the systematic approach. Something that I also found out is that many companies hire internal resources that have the experience with this kind of approach, and we see a lot of requests that comes to our site that request for the RFIs or the list of functionality to us is growing, and that shows that those companies are actually using those wish list or the functionality list for their internal processes. So I don't have the right percentage, but I would say it's growing.
It's like your parents and teachers said, do it right the first time, right? You won't
Yeah.
have to come back and do it again.
Yeah, and but it's so strange that we know that, but still so many companies are jumping the hoops and going through the shortcuts to get to the finish line quicker than is necessary. And if you think about it, spending 2-3 months in understanding your business requirements and processes is not such a huge price to
Sure.
pay if you think about the other side, which is the failure and spending all kinds of money in trying to recouping your investment or loss of business opportunities on your side. So 2-3 months of doing your homework properly is not such a big price to pay, especially considering that you're not talking to highly priced consultants that, for example, implement ERP applications. So when you're talking about implementation of an ERP, each consultant could be charging you a couple of $100 an hour, or maybe in some cases $400 to $500 an hour. And there are not only one or two of them. There might be 10 or 20 of them working for your project on a very, very extended amount of time, trying to do all of that work to customize and to try to fit the application to your requirements. And that is something that by default pays for that extra time and budget that you have to spend in your evaluation and selection process. A rule that I should say is like you need to spend between 10 to 15% of your overall budget on doing proper evaluation and selection. So if you have $1 million budget, you have to set aside $100 to $150,000 for doing this homework. Doesn't mean that you have to pay that to a consultant. All the internal cost and the resources that you actually spend should be able to cover some of the things that you want to cover.
Well, it makes sense. These are big decisions, and companies are running running their lifeblood on it now. So Mehdi, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, walking through our audience through this, and trying to give them some understanding and process and tricks of the trade along the way there. So really appreciate the time, Mehdi. MES audience, thank you so much for joining us as well, and we'll see you on our next webinar.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
All right, thanks.